Eleanor writes to us about her experience using the word daddy with her partner. Even though she's been into BDSM lifestyle for a few years now, she's always looked down on submissive using that term, until one day her partner shared that he'd like to be called that. While initially hesitant, she did finally start calling her dominant daddy, and now it's turned into her favorite word for him. She's partly shocked by how much she loves to call him that, and embarrassed that she likes it so much given her past attitude towards the word, and is struggling to process her reaction to using the word daddy.
I think one of the things we all struggle with as we move into this process of engaging our shadow is at first we're representing the perspective of the persona. Her public view of, oh, people who call their partner daddy, it means some negative, terrible thing, or it's whatever. Whatever her perception was that made her speak negatively about it was representing the public view, not her own inner heart. Then, after she crossed that boundary, she found that it did represent something true for her, and we can go into often what that is. And now she has to reconcile the fact that she was, in a way, dishonest. That's a harsh way of putting it. Disintegrated is perhaps a more accurate and milder version of it, that she was not truly representing her own heart, her own authentic view. She was representing what she had been told from the outside, and now she has to reconcile that inconsistency. I will say one of my favorite quotes, just as a reflection, not something I truly believe, but as a reframe on this, I believe comes from Gandhi. He said, "Consistency is a hobgoblin. I am not consistent to what I may have said at some previous time. I am consistent to the truth as I see it now." And there's an interesting notion there that there is a consistency to the truth, but also a willingness to grow and to admit that I've been wrong. Another version of that, this comes from Brandon Sanderson in his Way of Kings series, the Roshar series. He has one of his main characters accused by others of being a hypocrite. And he says, yes, I am a hypocrite. Sometimes a hypocrite is nothing more than a man who is in the process of growing. And there's a really interesting notion there. So with this person, I would give her those quotes and say, hey, yes, you are being hypocritical. That's true. You need to own that, but own it from the perspective of, as we grow, as we learn more new things, we inevitably become hypocritical to previous statements.
Yeah, there's also more to be said about how when you get a right of something, she's participating in this dynamic and she's calling him daddy, that when she likes it so much, that is a signal of something. The universe is saying something to her. Her psychology or inner psyche is signaling something. And you could be embarrassed, right? But you could also pause and ask yourself, okay, why does it feel so good? There was I don't know if it's a documentary or a book I was reading, but there was a submissive that was just talking about the experience. And she says that one of the terms that she's just practically addicted to and never gets old is the term good girl. She just can't get over being called that by her dominant. That was a person who had very much integrated that into herself. I mean, she was openly saying how much she loves being called that. Whereas this Eleanor is in the process of just finding out things about herself, because when she's just enacted daddy word, and it's so laden with meaning, like daddy,
Absolutely.
when you're calling the dominant daddy, it transforms you a little bit. And then when you find yourself in that new stance relative to your dominant, it can be jarring, right? Because something is now clicking that was not clicking before. There's a new depth that you've discovered. And this is a good moment, a good opportunity actually to dig into this specific word. We've talked about it before as well, but why is daddy such a evocative, emotional sort of term in the BDSM community?
I think there's a lot of reasons for it. And just finishing up what you said before, though, it is important to understand that for many things, the view from the inside is different than the view from the outside. How it feels when you're actually doing something is different than how you project it might feel when you're not doing it. And that's one of the challenges of people who are pulled to BDSM or interested in kink, but haven't done it yet, is that their projections are flawed. And often they get a better projection from something like an erotic story, even if it's unrealistic, because it's hitting a little bit more truth. Now, to answer your question about why the term daddy is evocative, it's interesting because it goes into things that she herself says in this little question. Is there is something shameful on some level, erotically humiliating about calling your partner daddy, right? Acknowledging that you are treating this person as an authority figure in your life. You're not treating them as an equal. You're treating them as someone who sets rules for you, whose approval you want, whose discipline you accept. And then also combining that with the sense that this is a loving engagement, that there's affection, there's kindness, there's the sense that this person is looking out for my best interests. And that framing is one that can be a struggle in a society that has pathologized the notion of following, the notion that everyone should be a leader. Well, if everyone's a leader, then there's no followers, right? The value of someone who will follow rules, who will follow an authority structure is actually quite high, but it's devalued in our society. And so I think that she has that conflict between the external idea that, oh, I should be an equal, I should be a leader, versus the sense of satisfaction that, hey, I trust this person to look out for my best interest. I trust them not to abuse authority. And I actually am really fulfilled by the notion of having someone set rules for me, who loves me, who gives me a great deal of affection, but also gives me structure, rules, discipline. And that combined with sexuality and the erotic humiliation creates a really fertile ground for not only a relationship, but also eroticism within that relationship, and keeps things alive in a way that I think most relationships are not. I was talking to a friend recently, and I found myself saying that most people, most vanilla people, consider sex episodic. It's this notion that, hey, we're going to go to the bedroom and have sex, and that's not going to impact the rest of our lives. And the reason this came up is she was reading my book, small plug, Love is a Kink, now available on Amazon. But she was reading my book, and she was afraid. She was like, well, I'd have to really trust my partner not to look at me any differently than if we did this in the bedroom, not to look at me any differently outside the bedroom. And I was kind of saying, you're a little bit missing the point, is actually he would look at you differently, but you're uncomfortable with the notion that that might be better. You might prefer how he looked at you in that other way. And that's not sense of degrading your worth as a person. It is the notion of taking a more subordinate role. And she did say, I think this is one of the core issues here, and I'm coming back to Eleanor in a second here, is she's like, I'm not sure I could ever trust someone that much, even my husband. And I was like, yeah, now you've hit the issue.
That's the issue.
If you need an equal voice and equal authority in order to enforce your own best interest with your partner, then no, you can't give them authority over you.
Yeah, that's a great point.
It's only in a situation when you trust your partner to truly have your best interests at heart, even if they must make a sacrifice for their own preference, then you can give them that authority and in fact might find that you enjoy it. And I think that's a little bit where Eleanor ended up, is she could not conceive of trusting someone. I've been with women actually that said this to me after we were in a dom-sub kind of interaction or relationship, that I could not conceive of trusting someone this much. And because I couldn't conceive of that level of trust, I could not conceive of ceding this much authority. It's only because I know you that I now am really satisfied by this engagement.
No, that's a great point. I agree with all of that. What I would tell Eleanor, I mentioned this a little earlier as well, is a lot of the times emotions are signals of, especially surprising emotions. I think I would go a little further. If an emotion in a situation comes across and surprises you, it is sending you a signal that you've not properly understood yourself the way you thought you've had.
Wow, that's cool. Yeah.
And then so in her case, if she's embarrassed by this word, calling him daddy all the time, even though she enjoys it, that conflict is signal. And it's an opportunity to like deepen the eroticism, like you said, of the relationship, because then if she understands it, she can lean into it. She can ask herself if she, when calling him that, is calling somebody she trusts that. Does he deserve to be called that? And if she internally can say, yes, that is the case, then it allows her to get deeper into her submission. But you raise a very important point, is that it's critical for the woman or the submissive to feel safe. And because we have this pro-feminist culture where girl bosses are supposed to be running the world and girl boss this and girl boss that, it's very difficult to cede control. We've talked about this many times on many episodes, how modern feminist culture makes this transition. This is so anti-feminist, at least modern feminist, whatever the flavor of it is these days. It's so antithetical to that, in itself can be oftentimes a mental block. And it's probably the source of her embarrassment to some extent. It would be different if she felt perhaps maybe shy or vulnerable. That I can understand. But embarrassment means that there's some cognitive dissonance going on between what you're doing and what you believe, that you have to try to work with that dissonance. If embarrassment is the primary emotion that comes up when you're using that word, because she's doing it all the time. So there's some point in time where she's not embarrassed, she transcends herself, and then after the fact, it's like, man, I can't believe I keep saying that. That dissonance there is signal for her to do some inner work.
I don't know if I agree with that, actually. That's an interesting take.
Yeah, okay.
Partly, after we're done here,
Right.
Whenever you think about this moment, I want you to blush bright red.
Right.
I want you to feel embarrassed when you transcend it now, and then I want you to look back on this. But part of the reason for that is that in the moment, we are very deeply in the shadow. We're integrating, we're in that space. After the moment, we kind of reintegrate the persona, and when the persona looks back at that shadow, there is embarrassment.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think we're actually in disagreement, because in her case, this embarrassment is not necessarily...
unfortunate. I prefer to disagree with you.
Her embarrassment is not necessarily willed. It's not like it's an intentional end state that the dominant is trying to get her to, right?
I get that.
She's just spontaneously feeling embarrassed in the moment. She can continue to feel that way if that is what the dominant wants her to feel. Then he'll find other ways to embarrass her if daddy becomes well integrated. But in this particular case, embarrassed enough to write a question diving into the sensation of embarrassment. So it's obviously causing conflict. The embarrassment you're referring to with your submissive, I wouldn't call that a conflicted kind of embarrassment. It's almost a naughty, like, oh my God, I can't believe that embarrassment, which is actually much hotter than a confused embarrassment that she's...
That's actually a great point. If she alleviates this conflict, the embarrassment will likely still remain.
Oh yeah, and it'll be more fun.
But it will become more pronounced. Yeah. It will definitely be more fun, but also may even become more pronounced because the conflict may be detracting from the embarrassment on some level. It's an interesting notion. I've been surprised at times to hear women say that on some level they wanted a dom-sub relationship, but couldn't even believe that such a thing existed. And I think a lot of that does come down to the notion of trust and actually respect. The notion, I think it's easy to trust a man who's ineffectual because he's not going to harm you because he can't, too weak. But the combination of trust and respect, I think, has come for many women to seem almost unachievable or unimaginable. And thus, even their own fantasy of submission seems like something that belongs in another world, something that is merely a fantasy and can never be enacted. And then when the opportunity presents, it can be startling, as it is, I think, in this case for Eleanor, where the engagement here, it sounds like she's found someone that she does trust and respect, and there's a great deal of affection there, and she's engaged this, because why else would she have made that journey? She spoke so negatively of calling her partner daddy, and then decided to do it. Well, that's an interesting moment as well. Why would you, quote unquote, cross that limit? It's something in that relationship was likely different than what she was anticipating or than what she thought would be possible, and thus she was willing to explore it. And then when she explored it, in reality, in participation, she found something that she didn't expect.